He wasn't in a suit. He wasn't in the boardroom. He wasn't even supposed to be on that floor. But when the elevator failed, when the CEO of a billion-dollar tech company was trapped between metal and fire, it wasn't a firefighter who showed up. It wasn't a security team. It was a single black father in worn boots and a grease-stained uniform who pried open the doors with blistered hands and walked away before anyone even learned his name. He didn't ask for thanks. He didn't post it online. He just went back to work. Because that's who he was. What no one knew was that this quiet act would spark a chain reaction that would upend an entire company, shatter stereotypes, and redefine what leadership really looks like. This isn't a story about luck. It's about character. And how one man's integrity, shown in silence, became louder than any CEO's speech. It's easy to miss the people who make our lives function. The janitor who works past midnight. The maintenance man you nod to but never know. The single parent barely getting by while fixing the building that holds your name on the plaque. But sometimes the world flips upside down in a heartbeat, and those invisible lives become the ones that hold everything together. This story begins with a glitch, a flicker in the power grid, a blink, the kind you'd normally ignore if you were checking your watch or scrolling your phone. But in one of the tallest glass buildings in downtown Chicago, that flicker became the opening scene of something no one saw coming. Camille Rivers, CEO of Novacore Solutions, was on her way to the top floor, literally and figuratively. It was launch week, her company's biggest product drop yet. Her name was all over the press. Investors loved her. Analysts compared her to Musk and Jobs. She was immaculate, in control, and completely unaware that her elevator was about to trap her between the 32nd and 33rd floors. It was 7:06 a.m. No one else was in the elevator. No one else even knew she was there. The lights stuttered. The floor trembled. The cabin dropped 6 inches, then slammed to a stop. The panel went dark. No signal, no sound. Just silence and Camille's breath, quickening, echoing off the brushed steel walls. She banged the emergency call button. Nothing. She yelled, nothing. This woman, who ran a tech empire, couldn't get a single signal out from a steel coffin that cost $2.5 million in renovations. And as the minutes turned into an hour, her voice turned from commanding to cracked. Down below, in a grimy utility corridor far from executive suites and catered lunches, a man named Elijah Ward was already on his second shift of the day first. As a janitor at a local school, now as a maintenance tech at Novacore. 35 years old, 6'2", sweat already soaking through the back of his gray work shirt. Elijah was the kind of man you passed in a hallway without realizing he had 3 certifications, had once built a generator from spare parts, and could name every tenant's daily power usage by memory. But today, he wasn't thinking about his skills. He was thinking about rent, and his daughter Ava, who'd had nightmares 3 nights in a row. He just wanted to finish his shift, collect his paycheck, and get home before she asked again why. Mommy left, but then he heard something, faint, desperate, a voice. Elijah froze. The building sensors hadn't triggered an alert, but he trusted his ears more than Novacore's overpriced system. He followed the sound through concrete stairwells, across locked mechanical rooms, until he found it, single elevator shaft humming with static. The faintest cry for help echoing from behind a sealed door. He didn't wait for permission, didn't call for backup, didn't pause to worry about protocol. He grabbed his gear and pried the doors open by hand, metal screeching as sweat ran down his face. Inside, he saw her, Camille Rivers, the woman whose face he'd seen on 10-foot lobby banners, pale, silent, gripping the railing like it might disappear. He told her to stay calm, that he was getting her out. She didn't answer, just nodded like she was underwater. The emergency brake had failed. The override wasn't responding. If the counterweight slipped, the car could fall. Elijah jammed a block into place and wedged himself into the shaft. Sparks flew. He cursed under his breath. Wires stung his arms like lashes. One slip, and he'd be electrocuted. But he moved like a surgeon, breathing through the panic, balancing between raw muscle and quiet math. It took 12 minutes. Every second could have been his last. But when the doors finally groaned open and he pulled Camille free, her knees buckled. He caught her, gently, like she was made of something fragile. And before anyone else arrived, security, HR, PR teams with damage control in hand, Elijah disappeared. Back down the stairwell, back into the boiler room, back into invisibility. No interviews. No applause. Because Elijah Ward didn't save the CEO of NovaCore Solutions for glory. He did it because someone needed saving. And he was there. When Camille Rivers was pulled from that elevator, her mind was still trapped inside. Hours later, wrapped in a thermal blanket, hands still shaking despite the peppermint tea forced into them by NovaCore's crisis team, she barely remembered the man's face. She remembered the calloused hands, the weight of him steadying her, the voice calm, low, unshakable. But she couldn't picture him. It was as if the hero had no face, only presence. And before she could find words to thank him, he was gone. That's the thing about true acts of grace. They rarely stay to pose for pictures. By the next morning, the company was spinning the incident like PR gold. CEO narrowly escapes mechanical malfunction thanks to rapid response from building staff. The executive board panicked behind the scenes, lawyers whispering about liability, shareholders whispering about image. But what Camille couldn't stop thinking about wasn't the malfunction. It was him, the man who walked into danger without hesitation and left. Without a name, she asked HR for a report. Nothing. Facilities said, probably one of the night techs, ma'am. No one had an exact name. Not until an intern pointed out that the service logs for that shift listed an E. Ward as the technician on rotation. A low-level contractor, hourly, no benefits. Just a pass card and a radio. Camille asked to meet him. HR hesitated. There's protocol, ma'am. We're not sure he's a direct employee. Was he the one who pulled me out? It appears so. Then find him. Meanwhile, Elijah Ward returned to work like it had never happened. He didn't mention it to anyone, not even his daughter. He came home sore, burned, exhausted, and immediately started his second job at a downtown diner washing dishes until 1 a.m. that week. He missed rent by $38. Ava's school sent another letter about overdue lunch payments. And on Friday, his supervisor called him into the break room to say, "Hey, don't know what happened with that elevator thing, but people are talking. Just lay low." He was too tired to care, but the office wasn't quiet. The story had spread like wind through high-rise corridors. And when stories move without facts, they mutate. By Monday, whispers began. He was alone in the elevator shaft, right? Could have been sabotage. Hero act to cover it up. Look, I'm not saying he did it. But if you wanted a promotion. One name floated those rumors louder than most. Grant Hollister, Novacor's head of finance. A man whose smile never touched his eyes, and whose vision for company culture never included anyone who worked with their hands. Grant believed in clean desks, power ties, and invisible labor. He hated mess. And Elijah Ward, covered in soot and silence, represented everything Grant wanted scrubbed from the company's image. So when Camille finally summoned Elijah to her office, just 2 days after the rescue, the moment was already poisoned. He arrived late. His work shirt had grease stains. His hand was bandaged. He didn't sit until asked. Camille studied him. He didn't fidget. Didn't look her in the eye. Just stood like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Mr. Ward," she said, "do you know why you're here?" He nodded. "I pulled you out." A beat passed. "Yes," she said. "And you saved my life." He nodded again. "Was just doing the job." "That wasn't part of the job," she replied, voice firm but soft. "You went into an unstable shaft with exposed wires and no harness. You risked your life." He shifted his weight. "Wasn't time to wait for someone else." Camille was stunned by the simplicity of it. No bravado. No self-praise. Just truth. But before she could say more, Grant Hollister stepped in uninvited. "Camille, can I interrupt?" She nodded slowly. Uncertain. Grant turned to Elijah. "We've been looking into the elevator's maintenance schedule. Some irregularities. Wondered if perhaps you'd been aware of them." Elijah blinked. "Irregularities?" "Just asking," Grant said with a polished smirk. "You were on shift, after all. It would be helpful if you'd confirm you hadn't tampered with anything." Camille's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" Grant smiled wider. "Just covering bases. PR's been fielding some questions. We need to be thorough." Elijah's jaw flexed. "I've been on that circuit for 9 months. Every inspection passed. If you're asking whether I staged it, no. I didn't." Camille stood up. "That's enough, Grant." He blinked. "I just thought I said enough." Grant nodded and left, smugness evaporating behind a locked jaw. Camille turned to Elijah. "I'm sorry you had to hear that." "It's not. The first time shouldn't be any time." She paused, then asked the question that would change everything. "What would you do if I offered you a promotion?" Elijah looked stunned. "I'm a contractor. I'm the CEO." He hesitated. "I've got another job. Nights. Quit it." "I've got a daughter. Bring her here. We'll help." He shook his head slowly. "Why?" Camille exhaled. "Because someone finally showed me what leadership really looks like, and it wasn't in a boardroom. It was a man on his knees in smoke and sparks doing what no one else had the courage to do." For the first time, Elijah looked her in the eye. And for the first time, Camille realized just how much power could live in someone who never sought it. Elijah Ward didn't say yes right away. The offer hung in the air for 3 days, like a lifeline that felt too frayed to trust. Promotions weren't for men like him. Not the kind that came with keycards and dental plans. Not the kind that came from the top floor. People didn't ask what he wanted. They told him where to be, what to fix, how long he had until his next paycheck. But now Camille Rivers had flipped the script and he didn't know if he was allowed to pick up the pen. He thought about Ava, about the $600 emergency dental bill that had wiped out his savings, about the nights she cried because other kids had two parents and she had one who always looked tired. He thought about his own father, who worked 37 years in sanitation and never once got thanked by name. He thought about pride and fear and how sometimes they feel like the same thing. Then he said yes. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like jumping off a ledge and hoping the ground knew how to catch you. Camille arranged everything quietly. HR processed the new title, Assistant Director of Building Services, without a press release. She gave him an office near the back stairs, next to a closet that hadn't been opened in 3 years. He didn't mind. It was clean. It had a working outlet. And it was his dot, but walking through the halls now felt different. Eyes followed him, some curious, some judgmental, some just waiting. Grant Hollister avoided him altogether, which suited Elijah fine. But others, middle managers, front desk staff, began testing him in quiet ways. Are you supposed to be in here? Oh, I didn't realize that was your office. Did Camille really give you that position? It was death by 1,000. Microaggressions, and Elijah had survived worse. But that didn't mean it didn't sting. He buried himself in work. Inventory logs, equipment checks, preventive maintenance schedules. He cleaned up a 6-month backlog in 3 weeks. Found a safety violation no one else had noticed. Fixed the HVAC filter routing that had caused the third-floor migraines no one could explain. His results were bulletproof. His presence was not. Ava noticed the difference in him. At home, he smiled more but tired deeper. He made her pancakes. On Sundays, even when his hands ached. She started drawing pictures of him, not with a mop, but with a clipboard. "This is you being important," she said once. And he had to leave the room before she saw his eyes water. Then one day, Camille stopped by his office. No pretext. Just a visit. "I hear your department's got the lowest downtime metrics in the company," she said. Elijah shrugged. "We just fix what breaks before it breaks." She smiled. "That's more than most departments do." There was a silence, comfortable this time. "You ever feel like you're not supposed to be here?" he asked quietly. She leaned against the doorframe. "Every day for the first 10 years. Then I realized the people who make me feel that way are usually the ones scared I'll do the job better than they could." He nodded slowly. "You think that's what they're scared of with me?" She tilted her head. "I think some people are scared of having to respect someone they used to ignore." That stuck with him. It didn't solve everything, but it gave him something to grip when the floor beneath him felt unstable again. Camille left a moment later. No big speech. Just a quiet look that said, "I see you." That night, Elijah stayed late fixing a sensor in the emergency stairwell. No one saw him. No one thanked him. But the sensor worked. And the next day, when a fire drill startled the second-floor finance team, they exited through that stairwell without a hitch. Grant Hollister never knew who kept him safe, but Elijah did, and that was enough. Spring at Novacor brought humidity, a product launch, and the kind of tension that turns even the calmest executive floor into a powder keg. Elijah Ward felt it before anyone said a word, through the walls, through the way the elevators groaned. Under peak load, through the whispered tones of engineers running late to meetings. Something was off. Not broken yet, but close. He knew that feeling. It was the same one he felt in his gut the day before the electrical fire at his old building. Pressure. Silent. Heavy. Rising. It was Camille Rivers' biggest week. Months of development. Billions in investment. The eyes of the industry glued to her every move. She was rehearsing her keynote when a facilities alert popped on her private dashboard. Level 4 climate control error. Zone A. That was their most critical server wing. A temperature spike there could shut down the entire system, and with it, the live demo she was about to broadcast to the world. The IT department panicked. They filed a ticket, waited, escalated, waited more. But Elijah didn't wait. By the time anyone above him had even read the notification, he was already there, tool bag slung over one shoulder, thermal scanner in hand, walking into a room that felt like an oven, wearing a badge that still made security pause before waving him through. The primary coolant intake was redlining. Condensation leaked onto the floor like sweat from the building's bones. And the override code, locked, missed in the last firmware update. A tech team would need 90 minutes to patch it. He had 12. Elijah called Camille directly. "Ma'am, I need verbal authorization to bypass the intake limiter. We're going to lose the mainframe if I don't reroute the coolant now." She didn't hesitate. "Do it. Gonna trip the breaker. Might knock out lights in 3 zones. Do it." He hung up, dropped to his knees, and started rewiring the intake valves by hand, his palms slick with coolant, his breath fogging from the temperature delta. A circuit breaker popped. The lights cut. Somewhere above, someone probably shouted. But down there, in the bones of the building, Elijah worked like he always did, invisible and irreplaceable. 11 minutes later, the system cooled. The servers stabilized. The zone temp dropped from 92 to 68 degrees. The lights flickered back. And Camille's live demo launched on time, seamless, pristine, historic. She got a standing ovation from investors. The stock price surged 6%. No one mentioned Elijah. Not in the press. Not in the post-launch celebration. Not in the photo spread that ran in Tech Innovator Monthly. But Camille knew. And so did her executive team. The next day, she called a full staff meeting. Not a Zoom. Not a newsletter. In person. She stood in front of a floor packed with employees, engineers, coders, custodians, legal aides, and told them the truth. The success of yesterday's launch wasn't just because of brilliant code or visionary design, she said. It was because when something critical failed, someone in this building didn't hesitate to fix it. Someone who didn't need a title to take responsibility. "Elijah Ward, would you come up here for a moment?" There was a long silence, a rustle. Then slow, scattered applause as Elijah stepped forward, shoulders stiff, eyes wary. Camille continued. 6 months ago, this man pulled me out of a failing elevator and vanished before I could say thank you. He's done more to safeguard this company, quietly, consistently, than anyone in this room knows. And yesterday, he saved this launch, again, not with code, with courage. The applause grew louder, not a PR clap, a real one. The kind that comes when people realize they've been blind to something vital. When respect replaces assumption. Later, Elijah would find a letter in his locker, typed, unsigned, just one sentence. "We see you now. We won't forget again." He folded it carefully and placed it behind Ava's school photo in his wallet. He didn't need a trophy. He already had a reason. For the first time in years, Elijah Ward started showing up 5 minutes early, not because he was afraid of being late, but because he wanted to be early. There was something new in the way people greeted him now, less polite, more personal. Maintenance staff high-fived him. IT guys offered coffee. The design interns who once avoided eye contact now asked for help with building access questions. Not because he was the hero, but because he had become something far rarer in corporate culture. Trusted Dot, but the old instincts didn't leave easily. He still walked the halls like a ghost. Still avoided the executive break room. Still braced when people called his name too loudly. Trust takes time to settle when your past is built on dodging suspicion more than earning praise. Ava noticed the change. Her drawings got more detailed. She added a little badge to the figure she labeled Daddy at Work. It wasn't a superhero cape. It wasn't armor. It was a clipboard and a radio, exactly what he carried every day. Because in her eyes, that was enough. That was power. At Novacor, Camille knew things had shifted, not just in how the company functioned, but in what it valued. The leadership summit that spring included a new policy, open-door mentorship. Directors were now required to dedicate 2 hours each month to mentoring non-management staff. Camille credited Elijah by name when announcing it. If he hadn't been here, she said, this company would have lost more than servers. We'd have lost our soul. That phrase echoed down the halls, but not everyone was celebrating. Grant Hollister, polished as ever, smiled through clenched teeth. On paper, the policy looked good. In practice, it meant disruption. And Grant despised disruption, especially when it came from someone who hadn't paid their way through Harvard Business School. So, Grant invited Elijah to a lunch meeting. The restaurant was high-end, the kind where linen napkins feel like they cost more than your last grocery bill. Elijah showed up in pressed khakis and a clean collared shirt. Grant wore the same $1,200 suit he always wore when pretending to be benevolent. Elijah, he began smoothly, I wanted to say congratulations, you've really made an impact here. Elijah nodded cautiously. Appreciate that. Grant swirled his wine. I also wanted to offer some advice. Friendly, of course. Elijah didn't blink. Let's hear it. You've come very far, very fast, which is wonderful. But sometimes people who rise quickly also burn out quickly. There's politics at this level, expectations, pressure. I just want to make sure you're prepared, that you don't overstep. Elijah leaned forward, calm but steady. Overstep. What? Grant gave a slim smile. Perception. There's been talk. Some feel you've become too central. That Camille's attention should be more evenly distributed. Elijah stared at him. Are you saying I should disappear again? Grant's smile didn't move. I'm saying pace yourself. Fame is a flame. Elijah sipped his water slowly. I'm not chasing fame. I'm fixing what breaks. That used to be the job. He stood. I'm going to go now. Because I don't think you invited me here to mentor me. I think you invited me here to warn me. Grant raised a brow. And I don't respond to warnings, Elijah added. I respond to results. Then he left. No slammed doors. No threats. Just dignity. Camille heard about the lunch within an hour. She called Elijah to her office. "You okay?" she asked. He shrugged. "You were right. They don't like respecting someone they used to ignore." She smiled softly. "Good thing. You're not here to be liked." That week, Elijah submitted a new building operations plan. Efficient, scalable, sustainable. It cut 12% from the utility bill. Camille approved it within minutes. The board followed her lead, and suddenly, Elijah wasn't just fixing things. He was building something, the foundation of trust. It started with a flicker, just like the day of the elevator rescue. Only this time, the stakes were higher, and the margin for error was thinner. It was a Tuesday right before a major investor presentation at Novacor. Camille Rivers was set to speak at precisely 9 a.m. sharp broadcast to a dozen regional offices and 1,000 remote viewers. This was the quarterly moment when stock prices rose or fell. And at 8:47, the lights across the entire third floor went dark. No warning. No surge, just gone. Conference rooms blinked out. Projectors died mid-boot. Wireless routers failed in unison. Phones dropped calls. And in the control center, chaos bloomed like a forest fire. Backup generator didn't kick in. Someone yelled, "Server ping timing out." Someone else shouted. There was yelling from legal, IT, and PR, but Elijah Ward wasn't yelling. He was already moving. He'd seen this pattern before. A grid-level cascade. But this wasn't just faulty wiring or a trip breaker. This was a system sync failure. The building had been too smart for its own good. Every smart plug, every sensed light, every climate-controlled node had overloaded at once, flooding the main line with garbage signals. The building had short-circuited itself. Elijah didn't wait for permission. Again, he took the service stairs 3 at a time, dropped to his knees at the electrical subpanel behind the cafe, yanked off the faceplate, and started diagnosing. By flashlight and feel. Camille got wind of the blackout within 2 minutes. Her first words weren't about damage control. They were 2 syllables. "Where's Elijah?" He was already under the mainframe. The head of IT arrived 5 minutes later, shouting, sweating, uncertain. "We're rooting through the backup." "It's not holding." Elijah cut him off, calm but firm. "Your failover relay's stuck in a loop. The system thinks it's already on generator power. It's rejecting real power. It's a software confusion error. Then we need to reboot. If you reboot the wrong sequence, the main grid might fry the server. You'll be offline for hours." "Then what do we do?" Elijah pulled the master fuse. Silence. The air in the room shifted. The IT head looked horrified. "You just killed power to the whole." Elijah finished rewiring by hand. "Give me 10 seconds. He rerouted power through an emergency line the architects forgot existed, flipped the override, and hit the main breaker like a man starting a heart with his own hands. The lights blinked, then held. Power surged back floor by floor. The server rebooted clean. The broadcast synced just in time. At 9:02 a.m., Camille stood in front of a global audience as if nothing had happened. Her mic worked. Her feed was clean. The investors never knew, but her leadership team did. And this time, Camille didn't wait to address it privately. She called an emergency town hall. The entire building gathered, remotely and in person within. The hour, Camille stood on the central stairwell, looking down at hundreds of faces. She held up the failed relay chip in her hand. This tiny piece of plastic almost cost us everything today. But it didn't. Why? Because one man again saw what no one else saw, did what no one else could, and saved this company again before most of us had our second cup of coffee. She turned toward the back of the room, where Elijah stood quietly in his coveralls, eyes on the floor. Elijah Ward isn't just a technician. He's Novacore's insurance policy. He's our foundation. And starting today, he's also our Director of Infrastructure Integrity. There was a pause, just long enough for the room to process what that meant. Then, thunderous applause. And Elijah? He didn't cry. He didn't pump his fist. He just nodded once. Because deep down he wasn't surprised by the promotion, not because he expected it, but because he'd earned it. And everyone finally saw it. With his new title, Elijah Ward officially became something no one at Novacore ever thought to prepare for, a black man from the maintenance department, now sitting 2 seats from the CEO during operational planning meetings. Not because he played the game, but because he rewrote the rules. His office was upgraded barely. He asked for the same square footage, just better airflow. He still brought his own coffee in a battered thermos. Still walked Ava to school on Fridays. Still fixed things. Just now, the things included failing departmental coordination systems, broken communication chains between engineering and procurement, and a building-wide over-reliance on smart tech that lacked human redundancy. Camille watched him adjust, never once correcting his posture to match the room. He didn't lean back like executives do. He leaned forward-focused, curious, unbothered by jargon. He didn't come from spreadsheets. He came from sweat. And he carried that with him like armor. But not everyone welcomed the new dynamic dot at a quarterly strategy session. One of the senior advisors, Harper Dunn, head of global logistics, smirked as Elijah questioned the projected timeline for a fleet-wide system upgrade. "You're suggesting we delay a global implementation," Harper said, smiling like a lion with too many teeth. "Because a former maintenance supervisor has a hunch?" Camille raised an eyebrow. Elijah didn't flinch. "No," he said. "I'm suggesting we delay a rollout that would crash your international operations because your beta server can't handle encrypted traffic at scale. Your hunch is a business risk. Mine is a wiring diagram and 3 years of system logs." Silence, then a slow clap from Camille. Harper never asked another condescending question. Respect comes slow in spaces designed to exclude. But once it arrives, it builds fast. Within weeks, Elijah began running cross-departmental audits, not to criticize, but to find what people were afraid to admit was broken. He wasn't a watchdog. He was a translator between departments, between floors, between worlds. His mentorship program, first suggested by Camille, now run by him, quietly matched junior IT staff with facilities leads and reverse-engineered collaboration through human connection. And it wasn't performative. It was real. The kind of cross-pollination that made a building smarter because the people inside it finally saw each other. He invited Ava to tour the building on a Saturday morning. Showed her the breaker rooms, the executive boardroom, the server vault, and the rooftop maintenance panels. "You know what this all is?" he asked, kneeling beside her. She blinked, wide-eyed. "What?" He smiled. just different ways of making sure people stay connected. Doesn't matter if it's wires or ideas. You keep people connected. You keep them safe. Later that month, Elijah was invited to speak at Novacor's all-hands town hall. He wore the only suit he owned. Not new, just pressed. He didn't give a speech. He told a story about elevators and power lines, about being overlooked, about what it means to work in silence and still show up when it counts. He ended with a thavai. Single sentence. Don't just notice the people who speak the loudest. Notice the ones who never stop showing up. Camille stood in the back, eyes glassy. And in that moment, Novacor shifted again, not with a rebrand or a mission statement, but with the quiet recalibration of what leadership looked like. Time passed, but the story of Elijah Ward didn't fade, it deepened. Not in headlines, not in interviews, but in how the building itself began to speak his name, quietly, reverently, through the tone of conversations in break rooms, through the way new hires were introduced to his story on day one, through the hallway plaques no one asked for, but everyone respected. By now, Elijah wasn't just Novacor's Director of Infrastructure Integrity. He was its human backbone. But what made him remarkable wasn't just his rise. It was his refusal to let that rise change why he worked. He still carried his own tools, often to the confusion of junior techs who now saw him as too senior to be hands-on. He'd simply nod and say, "Some things you don't unlearn." Then he'd climb into the duct or kneel by the fuse box without another word, because leading, to him, didn't mean delegating. It meant understanding every inch of what you're responsible for. That mindset began to reshape the company. Camille expanded the mentorship program company-wide. Ava's school received a quiet donation for its STEM lab with no press release. A new initiative named Project Overlooked launched, focused on recognizing invisible labor across Novacor's campuses. And every month, Camille insisted Elijah pick one name from the janitorial or facilities roster to be honored publicly. The first time he did, the custodian cried. Not because it was grand, but because no one had ever said their name into a microphone before. But still, Elijah kept his circle small. Camille, Ava, a few co-workers who didn't try to impress him. He wasn't trying to be a public figure. He just wanted people to stop being surprised that excellence could come in overalls and coffee-stained clipboards. Then came the letter. It was hand-delivered by Camille herself, stamped in silver, embossed with the Department of Energy's seal. Inside, an invitation to speak at a national leadership summit. Topic: the role of human-centered design in modern infrastructure. He looked up at her, stunned. "You want me to speak to federal policymakers?" She grinned. "No, I want you to show them what actual leadership looks like." He hesitated. "I'm not trained for that kind of thing." She smiled, gently. "You've been training for it your whole life." He accepted. And 2 weeks later, Elijah Ward stood on a stage in Washington, D.C. Beneath spotlights that once would have blinded him, now only warmed his shoulders. He spoke plainly about overlooked systems, overlooked people, about what breaks when no one cares enough to fix it, and what thrives when someone does. The crowd didn't erupt. It rose quietly. In respect, Camille watched from the audience, eyes glistening. And beside her, Ava, now 10, squeezed her hand tightly and whispered, "That's my dad." Afterward, When reporters tried to get him to talk about race, about poverty, about bootstrap myths, he shook his head and said, "I didn't do this alone. And I didn't pull myself up. I climbed up on shoulders. Some held me, some blocked me, but either way, I kept climbing." And then he walked off stage. No fanfare, no branding, just a man returning to the building that finally reflected the integrity he'd carried in silence for years. You could argue that Elijah Ward had finally made it. He had the title, the trust, the testimony. His story had inspired infrastructure policies, mentorship programs, and internal culture shifts across more than just NovaCore. Quietly, other companies began calling it the Ward Principle, the idea that a company's resilience lives in its least celebrated systems and most overlooked people. But Elijah never used the phrase. He didn't even like it. "I'm not a principal," he'd mutter. "I'm a man who didn't walk away." And that's what made him different, because when people rise, they often detach, climb up, cut ties, delegate out. But Elijah leaned in. He didn't become the story, he kept serving it. After the Washington Summit, NovaCore launched a satellite campus in Detroit focused on sustainable urban engineering and community-led design. Camille asked Elijah to co-lead the initiative. He refused the spotlight again, but agreed to do the work behind the scenes, on the ground, in the blueprint phase. He spent days with city engineers, nights walking through neighborhoods that reminded him of where he'd grown up, places where the lights still flickered for no reason, where elevators still groaned with age and no one came to fix them. In one community center, a little boy asked him, "Are you rich?" Elijah chuckled. "No, I work." The boy tilted his head. "But you're on TV. Mama said you're the guy who saved the computer place." "I saved a person," Elijah said quietly. The building just came after. And that, again, became a ripple. Camille, now operating with a leadership team half composed of people who'd once been dismissed as support staff, brought Elijah's philosophy into executive onboarding. Every new director now spent 1 week shadowing operations, not in conference rooms, but on the floor, carrying toolkits, following janitors, watching how it really works. Some resisted. Most didn't, and all of them walked away with new eyes. Even Grant Hollister, now in a diminished advisory role, was required to complete the program. He grumbled, laughed at first. Then, on his third day, watched a technician named Rosa rewire a faulty switchboard in a flooded sub-basement while standing ankle-deep in water with a busted ankle. She never asked for help, never missed a step. Just did the job. Grant didn't say much afterward, but when he passed Elijah in the hall later that week, he nodded, and this time it meant something. Elijah didn't expect apologies. He never sought revenge. He just believed people could learn if someone showed them how. He began mentoring Rosa quietly. And when her youngest son was hospitalized, he used his connections at NovaCore to make sure the family had what they needed: transportation, assistance, warmth. It never made the news. He never brought it up. But Rosa knew. And in her own way, she began mentoring others. That was the thing about Elijah's impact. It multiplied without him needing to track it. It lived in the gaps, in the spaces most executives forgot about. In the rooms without nameplates, the emails never seen, the hours no one billed for. Ava turned 11 that fall. She asked if she could give a presentation about her dad at school. They said pick a hero, she explained. Everyone else picked athletes or astronauts. What did you say? He asked. I said my dad fixes things no one else sees and makes people braver without even trying. He didn't speak for a long time after that. And later that night, when she was asleep, he stood outside on the apartment balcony, looking out over the city he'd quietly reshaped, not through speeches, but by showing up. He wasn't famous. He wasn't rich, but he was necessary. And now, finally, he knew it. There comes a moment in every life when what you've built begins to speak louder than you do. When the systems you've fixed, the lives you've touched, the quiet choices you made in hallways no one else cared about all begin echoing forward, without you needing to say a word. For Elijah Ward, that moment came not with applause, but with a knock on his door. It was Camille. She carried no briefcase, wore no heels, just jeans, a faded blazer, and eyes that looked like they'd already been crying. Elijah, she said, I need your help with something. He motioned her in. Not for the company, she clarified, sitting down. For me. He listened as she told him about a proposal she'd received from the Novacore board. They wanted to build something permanent, a commemorative installation, on the main campus. A place that celebrated resilience, teamwork, and the invisible foundations that held the company together. They want to call it the Legacy Room, she said. And they want you to help design it. Elijah shook his head gently. I'm not an artist. No, she replied. You're the blueprint. He didn't respond for a long time. Eventually, he said, What are you really asking? I'm asking if you'll let people remember you while you're still here. If you'll help us create something that shows every janitor, every tech, every overlooked kid who walks through these halls that this place was made for them too. He nodded once. That was all it took. Over the next few months, the space took shape. No statues, no gold plaques. Just a repurposed maintenance corridor that connected two major departments. Quiet, simple, the kind of place you'd only pass through if you knew it mattered. On the walls, stories, not just Elijah's, Rosa's, Ava's, Camille's own admission, of blind spots and learning curves. Anonymous stories from staff across the country, moments when someone stayed late, or risked something, or chose to see someone they didn't have to. One wall was devoted entirely to the quote Ava had written in her hero presentation. He fixes things no one else sees and makes people braver without even trying. And below it, etched in bronze, in honor of those who lead with their hands, their hearts, and their humility. When the room opened, Camille insisted on a small, private dedication. No ribbon cutting. Just a handful of staff, Ava at Elijah's side, and soft light pouring in from a newly installed skylight. Elijah didn't make a speech. He walked the room slowly, touched the frames, read the names. He paused longest at the photo from that elevator shaft, still blurry, still anonymous, and whispered, That's where it started. Ava looked up at him. No, Daddy, she said gently. It started way before that. They just didn't see you yet. He smiled, and in that moment, he understood something that had taken him his whole life to learn. Visibility doesn't equal value. But value, when lived out consistently, eventually forces visibility. You don't need to light the whole world on fire to leave it better. Sometimes, all you have to do is walk into smoke when no one else will and keep walking. Every day, every shift, every floor, until the people who once walked past you start walking with you. That's how legacies are, built not from above but from the ground. The world doesn't always reward quiet people. It rarely hands out medals to those who hold things together behind the scenes, who keep the lights on, the gears turning, the people safe without ever asking to be seen. But if Elijah Ward's story teaches us anything, it's that the deepest kind of leadership doesn't wear a title. It wears responsibility. He never demanded recognition. He never asked for a raise, a trophy, or a seat at the table. He earned those things by doing what most people avoid, showing up when it's hard, speaking only when it mattered, and fixing what no one else even realized was broken. He wasn't perfect. He didn't need to be. He was steady. And in a world that moves too fast, that kind of consistency is rare and powerful. In every office, in every building, in every system we rely on, there are people like Eliza. People who carry more than their job titles. People who make invisible choices that keep visible lives moving forward. Most of them won't end up in documentaries or legacy rooms, but they matter. And the greatest thing any of us can do, the most radical, is to notice them, not in pity, not as charity, but as equals, as leaders, as architects of the world we walk through every day without thinking. So the next time you step into an elevator, flick on a light, or log into a system that just works, pause. And remember this: behind every smooth function is a person like Elijah, a quiet, courageous, resilient human being who kept showing up even when the world wasn't watching. And if you've ever felt invisible, underappreciated, or underestimated, let this be your reminder: you are not alone, you are not unseen, and the value you carry has nothing to do with who's watching.